What's the good word, y'all? It's your boy DKB here. Day 9 of New York Jets training camp. And today was the first official green and white scrimmage. First time that we've had refs all off season. I believe Salah mentioned we'll have them again for one of the joint practices. Nonetheless, though, today's theme is double-edged sword, right? You've had your consistent performers, guys that have been studs or stars in a lot of these practices, and then you've had a few newcomers as well, or at least guys that stood out in a big way today. And then you've also had some issues that we've heard of recently kind of rear its head once again. So the biggest news to kick things off is we walked out of this green and white scrimmage healthy. No injuries to speak of. We also did get some injury updates. So Michael Carter II ideally will be back within 1 to 2 weeks. Then you have Malik Taylor, who we found out is dealing with the shoulder, who was out for this scrimmage. Could have been a big opportunity to solidify himself on the depth chart with him balling out in recent practices. Sauce Gardner was out today. Apparently he had a canceled flight returning from his personal absence yesterday. Didn't get into early this morning, and Salah made the executive decision to not have him out there. And then according to Stigers, it was his personal absence seems like it's tied to a close death within his circle. So rest in power to whoever that may have been, if that's accurate. Tyron Smith was out vet day. Morgan Moses out vet day. And then towards the end of practices, we got some blood flowing, right? Alan Lazard versus Brandon Echols chirping things up. Salah got in the middle to break that out before it became anything. And then Trey Swilling, the recent pickup UDFA for us. I believe he's a UDFA. Nonetheless. And then Irv Charles getting into it. And from what I heard, Trey Swilling swung at Irv Charles. So we'll see if there's any kind of ongoing punishment or penalties there for them. The Jets have done really, really good under Salah's tenure with there not being any excessive fighting, anything crazy, right? We don't have a Geno Smith type situation where, your DE is looking to take your chin off. So, huge pluses. In terms of on-field performances, Aaron Rodgers went 19 of 30 in the span of 4 drives, 208-ish yards, 0 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. 3 of his 4 drives ended up leading to or resulting in field goals. 1 of them was ended due to a turnover. And a lot of what I've heard and seen is that ultimately he looks like his general self that you would expect, right? Operated efficiently, effectively. One of the big pieces is that even though he threw a ton of darts out of the pocket, you got to see him on the move a little bit, and it didn't seem like there was any negative residual effects dealing with that Achilles. So huge pluses there, regardless of if he couldn't wheel the team into the red zone. Again, there's a lot of kinks to being worked out right now, especially with it feels like some growing self-inflicted wounds, which the staff is trying to cure. So I'm not too worried about it right now. But we'll see if it happens once we get lined up against some of these opponents during joint practices. Fashanu, this is a name that many of us could have penciled in as a starter, regardless of if we went out and was able to sign Tyron Smith or not, right? That was kind of the thought process for guys that wanted Fashanu drafted, or really any of the top left tackle guys, right? They were expected to be day one guys. That could be the case, but he got beat up on quite a bit during this scrimmage from my understanding, and this just carries into some of the stuff we've seen leading up to a lot of these practices. When you think about OTAs and rookie minicamp, where you had guys like Michael Clemens giving him a hard time, you had Eric Watts, the undrafted free agent that was winning. Now that we're in pads, stuff like that is going to mean a little bit more, but he's in the perfect opportunity. A backup role, 2 veteran tackles ahead of him. The Jets are only working him in at left tackle right now, so he can really just refine his technique and work on the mental aspects of things. But he did get a sack allowed via Jalen Holmes, from my understanding. And then even though he won some reps against Jermaine Johnson, he also got beat up a fair amount by Jermaine Johnson, which isn't saying a ton, right? If you're struggling against our defensive line, it would make since. So I take solace in the fact that leading up to this, we've seen days where the offensive line has been able to overpower, outmaneuver, technique excelled better than what we've seen on the other side of the trenches. So we'll see if this is a one-off situation or more of a habit for him that we'll have to figure out. But it is what it is, right? Grain of salt here. Garrett, 22-yard back shoulder catch from Rodgers. JBC over him, who's been having himself a very, very good camp so far. Alan Lazard, 20-yard back shoulder catch, sets up the winning field goal from my understanding, and that was against Brandon Echols. And one thing to note is the back shoulder catch is really one of the specialties of Aaron Rodgers. It's on display all over Alan Lazard's tape. The fact that Garrett Wilson is picking up on it pretty quickly, it works in our favor. And then you have guys like Malik Taylor when he's working into rotation, Malachi Corley. So everybody is getting a lot of practice with this more nuanced type throw that hasn't been a huge staple of the Jets passing attack with the previous quarterbacks that we've had. Tyrod Taylor, he leads the only scoring play of the day, which was a 23-yard dart touchdown to Jason Brownlee, an over-the-shoulder catch in the back of the end zone. And Jason Brownlee's really been coming on pretty strong, pretty solid. I'd say he's, maybe toe-in-toe with the likes of what you've seen out of Alan Lazard. Nothing extremely special, but he's having more positive plays than anything negative. And then, speaking of Jason Brownlee, 2-minute drive. That was the scenario his touchdown came in. Couldn't tell who was actually covering him. It looked like more of a zone situation because Ashton Davis ended up being the closest guy to him in the highlight reel that I saw. And then Tippmann had himself a couple of days where it didn't really come up about the bad snaps, but he killed the only drive that didn't result in points today. Actually, that's backwards. His drive knocked us out of the red zone. We were at the 8-yard line. His high snap took us back like 20-plus yards. We ended up kicking a 38-yard field goal, I think it was. So this will be a continuous thing. He needs to work on the technique. You already have Rodgers commenting about, ripping into his ass when he needs to. He can take it, and ideally, you hope that this doesn't come up during preseason games, right? If it happens during the practices, that's cool. Perfect time where the mistakes aren't, what's the word I want to look for here? I guess extremely detrimental to our win and loss column, right? Although you want to see that absolutely get curbed as soon as possible. And then Isaiah Davis, he was the guy that killed our only non-scoring drive of the day. Fumbled on 3rd and 2, forced by C.J. Mosley. And realistically, I talked about this before when it came to the RB2 battle. Isaiah Davis on paper has better hands than a guy like Braylon Allen, just from a statistical perspective. Seems more secure with the ball, but it's unfortunate for him in terms of closing the gap, because it does feel like Braylon Allen is starting to make a pretty sizable gap there, I guess, for lack of better words, right? He has a pretty considerable lead on that RB2 role, and for many different reasons, right? The run blocking, pass blocking, his ability to go out there and work in the receiving game, and then youth is on his side, right? The one thing you're going to look at when you see him is that he's huge, he's burly, when he's making these plays on the run game, and then you factor in that he has a lot of wear and tear technically on him, but also he's 20, right? Aaron Rodgers joked about him being the first guy that could actually be his son in the league playing on the same team as him. So we'll see if Isaiah Davis can turn things around for himself and ball out in some of these joint practices and preseason games. And then defensively, the guy that's had the best day that I've heard called out was Jamien Sherwood. And the fact that he's been talked about pretty highly as of lately from Robert Saleh, I think feeds into a lot of this as well. Multiple stops on the day in terms of the run game, multiple plays and coverage to minimize things, and forcing turnovers, etc. when he can. So he's a name I'm really, really looking forward to. I thought he could be cast out as maybe a surprise cut at one point earlier in this offseason, which has Surratt being on the roster, having a younger guy that you can kind of reset with after learning some things with Zaire Barnes. But Jamien Sherwood may be making a strong case to stay on the roster and ideally take over from C.J. Mosley whenever that ends up coming to fruition. But again, double-edged sword practice, up and down. It's kind of been the nature of the Jets for a while now. We'll see if we can stack together some elite performances. Somebody has to flounder, right? Ideally, you would like for it to be the offense, I think, from the perspective that everybody's assuming this defense will be top 5, top 3 when it's all said and done. So we'll see ultimately what happens, but let me know what you guys think, especially for any of you guys that were able to attend, and I'll catch you again. Peace.